Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Rosh Hashanah. We are up to our final two Mishnayot in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, Perek Daled Mishnah Chet. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilum Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Aranbayev and Eliyahu ben Burchai Israelov Menuchatam Began Eden Amen and Leavdil ben Chaim Lechaim v'Refuah Shalema B'Chabat Esther and Daniel Shalom ben Rosa B'Tor Shah Cholei Israel. The Mishnah teaches what a person should do in the event that he cannot fulfill the mitzvah of shofar unless he violates rabbinic laws. The Mishnah begins, Shofar shel Rosh Hashanah and ma'avirin alav et hatechum. To do the mitzvah of shofar on Rosh Hashanah, we may not go beyond the tchum, which is the Shabbat and Yom Tov boundary, even though we will lose the opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah. We know the sages decreed that on Shabbat and Yom Tov, a person may not travel outside his tchum, meaning he may not travel more than 2,000 amot from the place where he was living when Shabbat or Yom Tov began. He may not leave this area on Rosh Hashanah to obtain a shofar or to hear a shofar being blown. And the commentaries explain, it is certainly forbidden to do a biblically prohibited melacha for the sake of the mitzvah of shofar. Although blowing the shofar is a biblical obligation and aseh, it does not override the prohibition of melacha, because melacha is banned by both a positive commandment and aseh and a negative commandment, elot ha'aseh, as the Gemara explains on page 32b, Mesechet Rosh Hashanah. The sages took this one step further. They ruled in this context that even their own rabbinic decrees pertaining to Shabbat and Yom Tov have the same strength as the biblical prohibition of melacha. Therefore, just as it is forbidden to do melacha for the sake of the mitzvah of shofar, so too it is forbidden to transgress a rabbinic decree for this purpose. Even though the result will be that one will not fulfill the biblical mitzvah of shofar, the sages have the authority to require the passive non-performance of a biblical mitzvah when necessary, what we call sheval ta'aseh. Now this applies to a Rosh Hashanah that falls on a day of the week other than Shabbat. If it falls on a Shabbat, the sages banned performing the mitzvah of shofar altogether because they were afraid that one might carry the shofar in the public domain, which is biblically forbidden on Shabbat. The Mishnah continues, "Ve'en mefakechin alav et hagal," nor may we remove a pile of rubble that is on top of a shofar, since rubble serves no useful purpose on Shabbat and Yom Tov. It is muktzeh, which is a category of objects that according to rabbinic law may not even be moved on Shabbat and Yom Tov. Lo olin ba'ilan, nor may we climb a tree to retrieve a shofar. Velo rochvin al gabe be'ema velo shatin al pnei hamayim, nor may we travel to the shofar by riding on an animal or swimming in water. Now the sages forbade these activities on Shabbat and Yom Tov because in the course of doing them, one might unintentionally violate a biblical prohibition. One who climbs a tree might break off a branch, one who rides an animal might break off a tree branch used as a whip, and one who swims might make a raft as a life preserver. We spoke about this in Masechet Betzat, chapter 5, Mishnah 2. Then chotchin oto, if we have a shofar that needs to be repaired, we may not cut it. Ben bedavar shu mishum shvut, either with something that is forbidden by a rabbinic decree, such as a knife, or ben bedavar shu mishum lo ta'aseh, with something that is forbidden by a negative commandment of the Torah, such as a saw. Under biblical melacha, under biblical law, melacha is forbidden only if done in the usual way. However, the rabbis prohibited even unusual methods. A shofar is typically cut with a saw, not with a knife. Therefore, using a saw for this purpose is a biblical violation, while using a knife is a rabbinic transgression. But again, the rabbis forbade both methods. But if one wants to rinse a shofar with water or wine to improve its sound, he may do so because this is not considered a violation of the rabbinic prohibition against repairing a utensil. Repairing a utensil is defined as converting an unusable utensil into a usable one. Rinsing a shofar does not make it unusable. Rinsing a shofar does not make it usable since it was usable before. It merely improves the shofar's sound. Now, although we may not blow the shofar when Rosh Hashanah falls on a Shabbat as taught in Mishnah 1, the following is permitted. We do not prevent children from blowing the shofar even when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat. Aval mitaskin imahen ad sheilmedu. Rather, if they are mature enough to be trained, we may even occupy ourselves with the task of teaching them to blow the shofar until they learn. Now, the sages did not prohibit teaching children on Shabbat how to blow shofar. They banned only the performance of the mitzvah itself, because they're concerned that a person might carry the shofar in a public domain is relevant only where one's mind is taken up with the need to fulfill the mitzvah. If one is not involved with the mitzvah but is merely teaching children how to blow shofar, he's not likely to forget himself and carry it outside. Now, although in chapter 3, Mishnah 8, we learned that a child is not obligated in the mitzvah of shofar, the sages ruled that when a child is old enough to be taught how to do mitzvot, he should be trained in their performance. Now, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of shofar or any mitzvah, one must have intent to fulfill it, as we learned in chapter 3, Mishnah 7. Our Mishnah elaborates on this law. If one is preoccupied with some other matter and he blows a shofar without intent to fulfill the mitzvah, he has not fulfilled his obligation. This is the Tosfot Yom Tov explains our Mishnah based on the Rav in chapter 3, Mishnah 7. And one who hears the shofar from one who is preoccupied with another matter has also not fulfilled his obligation. Since the person actually performing the mitzvah did not have the proper intent, another person cannot fulfill his obligation by listening to him. Even if the listener intended to fulfill the mitzvah, he does not fulfill his obligation unless the one blowing the shofar also had that intent. And that is then a Mishnah Ched. We continue now with Mishnah Tet. There are two types of shofar blasts, the tekiyah, a single long note, and the teruah, a series of short notes. The Mishnah states how many times each type of blast should be sounded and how long each should last. The Mishnah begins, Seder tekiyot shalosh shel shalosh shalosh. The order of the blast is 3 sets of 3, meaning 3 sets of tekiyah, teruah, tekiyah. Now the commentaries explain, the Torah mentions the term teruah, a shofar blast consisting of a series of short notes, 3 times in the context of blowing a shofar. The Gemara on page 34a, Masechet Rosh Hashanah, learns from this repetition that there is an obligation to blow 3 teruot on Rosh Hashanah. Additionally, the Gemara derives from the Torah that whenever a teruah is blown, it must be preceded and followed by a tkiyah, a long uninterrupted note. Therefore, the biblical obligation is to blow 3 sets of tkiyah, teruah, tkiyah. 1 set of 3 is blown after the passage of kingship, 1 after the passage of remembrances, and 1 after the passage of shofars. We learned above in chapter 4, Mishnah 5, that the shofar is blown before and during Musaf. Our Mishnah discusses the blasts that are biblically required, which are sounded during Musaf. Shiur tekiyah keshalosh teruot, the total length of the 6 tekiyot. In each set of tekiyah, teruah, tekiyah, there are 2 tekiyot. Therefore, in 3 sets, there are 6 tekiyot. The total length of the 6 tekiyot should be the same as the total length of the length of the 3 teruot. Therefore, 1 tekiyah equals half a teruah. As the Rav explains, Shulchan Aruch discusses this in Orach Chaim chapter 590, Halakha 3. Again, we're basing it off the Rav in the Art School notes. Shiur teruah keshalosh yevavot. The length of a teruah should be like 3 whimpers. A whimper is made up of 3 very short notes. Therefore, teruah consists of 9 short notes. This is the Rav's second explanation against Shulchan Aruch, where we quoted Orach Chaim chapter 590, Halakha 3. Taka barishona umashach b'shniya chishtayim. If one blew the first tkiyah of a set of tkiyah, teruah, and tkiyah for the regular duration, but then made the second tkiyah of the set as long as 2 regular tkiyot, intending the long tkiyah to serve as both the last tkiyah of this set and the first of the next set, now normally the next blessing would be recited between these 2 tkiyot, as taught in Mishnah 5. The Mishnah's case must be that a shofar was not available until after the leader finished reciting Musaf, where the law is that all the blasts of the shofar are made together, as this Mishnah teaches next. So again, if one blew the first tikiyah of a set for the regular duration, but then made the second tikiyah of the set as long as 2 regular tikiyot, intending the long tikiyah to serve as both the last tikiyah of this set and the first of the next set, and biado el achat, the law is that he has blown only 1 tikiyah, 1 single long note. This long tikiyah counts only as the last tikiyah of the first set and not as the first of the next set, because a single sound cannot be split into 2. The Mishnah continues, Misha berach, if the prayer leader said the blessings of Musaf without the shofar being blown, because the shofar was not available at that time, ואחר כך נתמנה לו שופר, and then a shofar became available to him. תוקע ומריע ותוקע 3 פעמים. He blows 3 sets of תקיעת תרועה, תקיעה after the Musaf service, and does not need to repeat any of its blessings. Now the next part of the Mishnah applies to prayers of the whole year. We have learned that at times one person can discharge the obligation of another by reciting words or performing an action on his behalf, as we saw in chapter 3, Mishnah 7. The Mishnah discusses whether the prayer leader's repetition of the Shemona Esrei has this effect. Kishem kisheshliach tzibur chayav, just as the prayer leader is obligated to recite his own silent prayer and does not fulfill his personal obligation by repeating the prayer aloud for the congregation, kach kol yachid ve'yachid chayav, so is each member of the congregation obligated to recite his own silent prayer and cannot fulfill his obligation by listening to the leader's repetition. Therefore, if a person is capable of praying himself, he must do so because he cannot rely on the leader's repetition. The leader's repetition was instituted only for the benefit of those who are unable to pray themselves. In their case, it indeed suffices to listen to their leader. However, Rabban Gamliel disagrees. Rabban Gamliel says, Shliach tzibur motzi et harabim midei chovatan. The leader can cause the congregation to fulfill its obligation, meaning even someone who knows how to pray can fulfill his obligation by listening to the leader's repetition. According to Rabban Gamliel, it is not strictly necessary for an individual to pray silently, since everyone can fulfill his obligation by listening to the leader. The requirement for the congregation to pray silently before the leader's repetition was instituted only to give the leader an opportunity to review the prayer before he recites it out loud. Now the Rav does tell us the halakha kechachamim. The halakha follows the opinion of the sages. B'brachot shel kol hashana, regarding blessings that we say throughout the year. She'en shliach tzibur motzi ela et she'eno baki, that the messenger, the prayer leader, can only exempt someone who is not an expert in reading. Aval b'brachot shel Rosh Hashanah v'shel Yom HaKippurim v'shel Yovel, but the blessings of Rosh Hashanah and Yom HaKippurim of Yovel, she'en tisha brachot arukot, that there are 9 long blessings, v'nakol bekin b'hen, and not everyone are experts in them. Halakha ki Rabban Gamliel, the halakha follows Rabban Gamliel, shekishem shemotzi et she'eno baki, kach motzi et baki. Just like he can exempt a person who is not an expert in the prayers, so too he can exempt somebody even if he knows how to pray on his own. And that is in Rabotai today's Mishna Yomi. Hadran alach Masechet Rosh Hashanah v'Hadra Chalan. Baruch Hashem, Mazal Tov, we have completed Mishnah Masechet Rosh Hashanah, and we move on to Masechet Ta'anit Bezrat Hashem Bli Neder in the following Mishnah Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen v'Amen.